A low, rumbling thunder crept across the overcast sky as Adrian Hale killed the engine of his lawnmower. He was standing in his driveway, sweat clinging to his shirt, the air thick with the damp smell of cut grass. It was the kind of humid late afternoon that made breathing feel heavy, like trying to inhale through wet cotton. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it, figured it was just another robocall. He took a moment to stretch his aching shoulders and glance toward the house. A single porch light flickered, reflecting off the window's glassy sheen. Usually that glow gave him a sense of comfort. Today, it felt ominous. Before he could take a step inside, the back gate clicked open. Adrian's gaze shot up. Standing there, framed by the fading daylight, was Selina, his wife. Her blonde hair caught the last hint of the sun. She wore a fitted black jacket and jeans that hugged her figure, looking far too composed for someone returning home so late. But what made his stomach clench was the tall, broad-shouldered man at her side. "Adrian," Selina said, voice unnervingly calm. There was the faintest trace of a smirk on her red lips. The man's dark eyes, smooth complexion rested an arm around Selina's waist, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Adrian's heart drummed harder. He couldn't recall ever seeing this stranger before, yet the guy stood there like he owned the place. "Who is he?" Adrian asked, each word feeling like gravel in his throat. Selina cocked her head. "This is Darius Blake." She paused just long enough for the tension to thicken. "My boyfriend." Adrian blinked. The lawnmower's cooling metal pinged softly behind him. The world seemed to tilt. "Boyfriend? Selina, what are you talking about?" "That exactly," Darius spoke up in a confident drawl. He kept his arm around Selina, grin full of mockery. "Thought I'd drop by and introduce myself properly." Adrian's mind scrambled. He felt every muscle tense, like his body was preparing for a fight before his brain did. "This isn't funny," he muttered. "Selina, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but—" "Not a game," she cut in, her tone dripping with casual cruelty. "I'm done pretending, Adrian. You can't keep up with what I need. Darius can." He took a shaky step forward, fists curling at his sides. "Get out," he hissed. "Both of you." Darius let out a low chuckle. "Oh, you want us out? I was thinking you'd be the one leaving." There was a flash in his eyes that radiated challenge. Adrian made the mistake of lurching forward, trying to grab Selina's arm. Maybe he wanted to force an explanation out of her. Maybe he just needed to feel that this nightmare wasn't real. But before he could touch her, Darius's fist lashed out, connecting with Adrian's jaw in a crack that seemed to echo off the nearby houses. The blow sent Adrian stumbling, his vision blurred. Selina stood stock still, arms folded, the corner of her mouth curled as if satisfied. The throbbing in Adrian's jaw was immediate and intense. He spat on the ground, tasting copper. He'd never known Selina could look at him with such distant contempt. "You!" Adrian's anger pushed him up again. He rushed at Darius, who effortlessly sidestepped, then drove a knee into Adrian's ribs. Air exploded from Adrian's lungs. Another punch whipped across his cheek. Then a savage uppercut hammered his midsection. Adrian collapsed to his knees, pain detonating in every nerve. Through the haze, he heard Selina's voice, calm like she was reading a weather report. "That's enough, Darius. He gets the point." "Sure." Darius hovered over Adrian, smug. "Didn't want to overdo it." The yard fence creaked open again, and a flurry of quick footsteps approached. It was Terry Malone, their middle-aged neighbor. "Hey!" Terry shouted, shock in his voice. "What the hell is going on?" He grabbed Adrian's shoulder. "Adrian, you all right, man?" Adrian struggled to breathe, eyes fluttering. The corners of his vision went dark. He spotted Selina leaning against the doorway to the house, arms still crossed. She gave a tiny, almost bored laugh. "Get help!" Terry barked at no one in particular. "We need an ambulance." Darius shrugged like he'd just finished a casual workout. He exchanged a glance with Selina, who stepped closer to Adrian's slumped form. She stared down at him, no trace of sympathy in her eyes. "I'm staying here," she said coldly, hooking her arm through Darius's. "If you're smart, you'll stay out of my way." Adrian's breath rattled in his throat. Terry's urgent voice blended with the pounding in his ears. Darkness pressed in, swallowing the yard, the trees, the flickering porch light. He felt the rough cement beneath his palms, smelled the tang of blood, and caught one final glimpse of Selina's silhouette fading as she disappeared inside. His last conscious thought was how everything he once knew had been flipped upside down, like a sudden storm had ripped through his life with no warning. Then the blackness took over, and he was gone. Adrian stirred to the steady beep of a heart monitor and the faint antiseptic odor of hospital hallways. A stiff bandage stretched across his ribs. His head felt like someone had used it for batting practice. The overhead fluorescent lamp hummed quietly. He became aware of a shape slumped in the visitor's chair. Terry Malone, arms folded, eyes half closed. At the sound of Adrian shifting, Terry blinked awake. "Hey," Terry said softly, dragging the chair closer to the bed. "You're back with us." Adrian swallowed, his throat like sandpaper. "How bad?" "Doc says cracked rib, some bruises. No permanent damage. But you were out cold." Shutting his eyes, Adrian let out a bitter exhale. Memories of the evening slammed back, Selina's cutting words, the relentless blows from that man, Darius. His own home turned into a war zone in a heartbeat. Terry cleared his throat. "Look, man, the cops took a statement while you were barely conscious. They want an official complaint. But I wasn't sure what you wanted to do, so—" He fidgeted. "Honestly, I think you should press charges." Adrian tried to sit up, wincing at the stabbing ache in his side. "Yeah," he managed, though the idea of seeing Selina or Darius again sent his stomach into a knot. Just then, the door swung open and a uniformed police officer stepped in. Her badge read Officer Quinn. She gave Adrian a professional nod. "Morning, Mr. Hale. Feels like you had a rough night." He forced a tight grin. "Something like that." Quinn pulled out a notepad. "I've got preliminary details from Mr. Malone here. Says your wife and a man assaulted you. You want to confirm that?" Adrian stared at the sheets, mind churning. "Yeah, that's correct. His name is Darius Blake, and my wife is Selina Hale. But—" He hesitated, voice low. "I don't know how she wants to be addressed now." "Understood." Quinn jotted a few lines. "You plan to file a formal complaint?" Adrian looked at Terry, then back to Quinn. A swirl of humiliation coursed through him. I'm not sure yet. Let's say yes for now. I need a bit more time to think." "All right." The officer nodded in acceptance. "I'll leave my card with you. If you remember more details or have questions, give me a call." When she left, the room fell into a heavy silence. Adrian felt the tension radiating from Terry. "She's done a 180, man," Terry said eventually, voice hushed. "I never saw Selina so cold." Adrian ground his teeth. "Neither did I. We were fine, I thought." Yet the memory of Selina's sly smirk shredded that illusion. As the hospital bustle seeped in nurses passing by, distant announcements, Adrian's mind drifted to simpler days. The first time he met Selina at a coffee shop, her bright laugh, the way she leaned over the table with an easy smile that made him feel invincible. Their wedding 2 years ago, in that little chapel with her parents, Edmund and Lorraine, who insisted everything be traditional yet cozy. "Guess those days are done," he muttered under his breath. "What?" Terry asked. "Nothing," Adrian replied, shaking the thought away. He forced himself upright. "I'm getting out of here as soon as they let me." A nurse soon arrived, explaining test results and discharge forms. Adrian scribbled his signature, the pen trembling slightly in his grip. She handed him a list of care instructions, advising rest and pain meds. "Any place you can stay for a few days?" she asked kindly. "You'll need help. Minimal lifting, no sudden movements." Adrian realized that going back to his own house with Selina and Darius was impossible. "I'll figure something out," he said. "Maybe I'll crash at a friend's." Terry perked up. "Hey, you can stay at my place until you sort this out. My couch isn't fancy, but it's better than dealing with that." He didn't need to finish the sentence for Adrian to feel a wave of relief. Despite the throbbing pain in his side, Adrian felt a spark of determination ignite beneath the layers of shock. Something told him this was just the beginning of a battle he never imagined fighting. He would gather his resources, piece together an exit strategy. Because whatever had happened last night was bigger than a marital spat, it was a gut-punch betrayal. "Let's go," Adrian said, slipping carefully off the bed. "I need to see the damage for myself." A grim look passed between them. Terry nodded. "All right, man. Let's get you home well. Away from home, anyway." And with that, Adrian limped toward the hospital corridor, bracing himself for the wreckage he'd have to face next. Nightfall set the city in gentle shadows as Terry's car approached the curb outside Adrian's single-story home. What used to be a warm site porch light illuminating the front steps now looked eerie, a reminder that nothing inside these walls was the same. Adrian's breath caught as he spotted the new lock on the front door. A crisp, metallic sheen, definitely not the one he'd installed a year ago. He tried the knob, found it deadbolted from the inside. "Jesus," Terry muttered. "She changed the locks already?" Adrian's pulse throbbed at his temple. "Looks that way." He limped around to the side, wincing with each step. The living room window was unlatched, something he'd never gotten around to fixing properly. With Terry's help, Adrian hoisted himself through, gingerly bracing his ribcage. Once inside, a stale hush greeted him. The couch was stripped bare, no blankets or pillows in sight. His TV was still on the stand, but something about the room felt foreign. "Stay here," Adrian whispered to Terry. "I just need to see what's left." He inched down the hallway. The overhead light flickered, casting stripes of pale yellow across the floor. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. Adrian's heart clenched. That had once been their space where Selena would cuddle up and laugh at his silly jokes, or read magazines in bed while he fiddled with the radio. He pushed the door open. The bed was unmade, but not with his sheets. A men's jacket, definitely not his, hung off the bedpost. Darius's jacket, probably. A wave of anger flared. The closet was flung wide, half the clothes replaced by items Adrian didn't recognize. Selena's dresses were still there, but now overshadowed by a row of men's shirts, 2 pairs of scuffed sneakers. He walked closer, feeling an icy chill. If there had been any doubt Selena's betrayal was real, it vanished now. This wasn't a fling. Darius's stuff was integrated, as if he'd moved in. Adrian forced himself to breathe evenly, ignoring the throbbing in his rib. He stepped back into the hallway, noticing a pile of random boxes near the guest room. On closer inspection, he realized they were his belongings shoved into cardboard crates. A lamp, a few work files, jackets, even picture frames. Wedding photos with Selena's face carefully turned to the corner, out of sight. "Unbelievable," he muttered, picking up one photo. It was from their honeymoon in Florida, Selena clinging to his arm on a sunny boardwalk, both smiling like they owned the world. He slid it back into the box. A faint creak behind made him spin around. Selena stood in the corridor wearing a simple tank top and jeans. Her arms were crossed under her chest, eyes narrowed. "You're trespassing," she said flatly. "Didn't you see the new lock?" His jaw tensed. "My name's still on the deed. Our name, if you recall." She snorted. "Not for long." Adrian bit back a surge of profanity. "What happened to you?" The question slipped out raw and ragged. "We had a life, a plan. Then suddenly you're like this." Selena's lips curled. "Don't play innocent. You've been ignoring me for months, working late, pushing me aside. Darius doesn't. He sees me. He's what I need." "That doesn't give you the right to break everything, Selena." She raised an eyebrow. "I can break whatever I want. Look, it's simple. If you won't leave voluntarily, we'll force you out. Or haven't you learned that from last night?" Anger radiated up Adrian's spine. Every bruise on his body was a reminder of Darius's fists. "You think you can threaten me? You and that—" He stopped himself, steadying his voice. "At least let me get my clothes, my documents." She shrugged. "They're in the boxes. Take them and go. Don't come back unless you want a repeat of last time." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the hollow corridor. Terry, having heard the confrontation from a distance, stepped forward, his expression uneasy. "Dude, let's just grab your stuff and leave." Adrian inhaled, shaking with adrenaline. He hated himself for feeling cornered in his own house. But there was no point in continuing the fight. Not tonight. Not when he was still bruised and outnumbered. He sifted through the boxes, snagged a duffel bag of clothes, a folder of important papers, and a couple of personal items he couldn't bear to abandon. All right, let's go, he said tightly. Moments later, they were back outside. The house that once felt like a safe haven now glowed with a malevolent hush. Adrian stood by Terry's car, arms full of the last scraps of normalcy he could salvage, heart pounding with anger and hurt. "Where to?" Terry asked gently. Adrian clenched his jaw. "Your place, if that's okay. I need a night to think." Terry nodded, understanding. And as the car pulled away, Adrian forced himself not to look back, terrified that if he did, he might never muster the will to leave again. The night sky opened up with a drizzle that soon built into a steady downpour, the kind that soaked through your skin in seconds. Adrian sat in Terry's dimly lit living room, rummaging through the meager possessions he'd retrieved. A dull ache in his ribs reminded him to move slowly, but each breath sparked with leftover rage. His phone vibrated. He flipped it over to see a text from Selena. "Don't think you can sneak in again. Darius doesn't mind finishing the job." Adrian read it twice, a sour taste rising in his mouth. Without replying, he switched off the phone. Outside, the rain drummed on the rooftop like an endless funeral march. "I can't believe she's doing this," Terry muttered from the doorway. He carried 2 mugs of tea, setting one on the battered coffee table. The Selena I knew was never cruel. Adrian exhaled, picking up the hot mug. "Maybe I never really knew her," he said quietly. A beat of silence hung between them. "You sure you don't want to call the cops again?" Terry asked. "That message counts as a threat." Adrian shook his head. "I filed a preliminary complaint already. I just need to talk to a lawyer, figure out the property details." He paused, swallowing. "I can't go toe-to-toe with Darius physically, not yet." Terry studied him for a moment. "Well, my place is yours for as long as you need. The couch isn't the Four Seasons, but it's better than that hospital bed." Adrian managed a thin smile. "Thanks, really." He sank onto the old plaid couch, fiddling with a photograph from his box. Selena and him at a friend's barbecue last summer, arms around each other, sun in their eyes. She looked so earnest, so real. The memory hit him like a gut punch, reminding him how drastically things had changed. His phone vibrated again this time. It was Lorraine, Selena's mother. The ring stabbed at his tension. He hesitated but finally picked up. "Adrian?" Lorraine's voice trembled with concern. "Edmund and I heard you were in the hospital." "Just got out," he replied, forcing calm. "I'm still in one piece." She breathed shakily. "We don't understand what's happening with Selena. She refuses to talk to us, says we should mind our own business." Adrian shut his eyes, imagining the heartbreak in Lorraine's expression. "I wish I knew too. It's like she flipped a switch. She's with some guy, Darius Blake, and she's not afraid to let him—" He bit off the words, not wanting to worry them more. Lorraine's voice shook. "Adrian, please let us help. We can talk to her. Maybe we can—" He sighed. "I appreciate it, but I doubt she'll listen. Not now. I'll keep you posted." When the call ended, Adrian's shoulders slumped. He had a swirl of decisions to make. Divorce lawyers, potential restraining orders, moving out for good. The weight pressed down on him like the dark sky outside. "Guess it's all unraveling," he murmured to Terry. Terry gave a solemn nod. "Might be time you get out of town for a bit. Clear your head, or maybe do something about this. You can't live in fear, man." Adrian stared at the rain, a flicker of something new stirring in his chest. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You're right." He reached for his jacket, ignoring the stab of pain. "I'll handle the legal stuff tomorrow." And then, he hesitated. "Maybe I'll see if there's a way to protect myself. I'm not letting that bastard get the upper hand again." A flash of lightning outside lit up the windows, revealing the sky roiling with storm clouds. Adrian couldn't help but feel it mirrored his inner turmoil. The anger, the betrayal it all brewed into a dark swirl of determination. He tossed the phone aside, ignoring any new messages. Fate had thrown him into an unwinnable fight. But if there was one thing he knew, it was that he refused to remain a victim. As midnight approached, the storm raged on. Adrian lay back on the couch, eyes open in the flickering glow of a nearby lamp. Every drop of rain hammered a reminder, it's time to stand up or get washed away. In that echo, he found a shard of resolve. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get him through the night and enough to steel himself for whatever tomorrow might bring. A heavy drizzle blurred the windshield as Adrian Hale eased his old sedan into the driveway of a modest suburban home. The place belonged to Jackson Ward, an old buddy Adrian hadn't seen in years. They'd reconnected briefly on social media. Adrian had sent a late-night message explaining he needed a place to crash after his marriage imploded. The rain dripped from the edges of his hood when he stepped out of the car. Jackson opened the front door right away, a concerned look on his face. He was shorter than Adrian remembered, with close-cropped curly hair and a shirt that read, "Tacos are life." "Dude, you made it." Jackson's voice was warm. "I was worried you'd get lost in this weather." Adrian managed a tight grin, pain still lingering in his ribs. "I almost did. Thanks for letting me stay." "No problem." Jackson ushered him inside. The living room smelled faintly of microwaved popcorn, and a football game murmured from the TV. "Bathrooms down the hall if you want a shower. Guest rooms to the left." Adrian set his duffel bag on the couch. "Appreciate it. I didn't know where else to go." Jackson nodded. "Yeah, you mentioned you've been dealing with some major crap. Want to talk about it?" Adrian hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. Where to begin? He recalled the memory of Selena standing beside Darius, that smirk on her lips. His bruises were still fresh. "My marriage is basically over," he said in a low tone. "My wife has another guy, a violent one. I can't go back to my own house." Jackson's brows shot up. "Man, I'm sorry." He glanced at Adrian's tense stance. "You look like you could use a warm meal and some rest, but for what it's worth, I'm here if you need a sounding board." They ended up sitting at the small kitchen table with mugs of instant coffee. The quiet hum of the refrigerator underscored the tension swirling in Adrian's chest. "You know," Jackson ventured cautiously, "maybe you should, learn self-defense or something. Not saying you should become Rambo overnight, but it might help you feel less exposed." Adrian studied the rim of his mug. Self-defense. The idea scratched at his mind. He'd always been more of a mild-tempered guy, never threw fists at anyone. But remembering how Darius pummeled him made his stomach twist. "I'm not really the fighting type," he mumbled. Jackson shrugged. "I get it. But if this new boyfriend of Selena's is as dangerous as you say, you need to protect yourself, or at least build some confidence so you're not looking over your shoulder all the time." They chatted a bit more about old times, about Jackson's job at a local car dealership, about absolutely anything but Selena. Eventually, Adrian couldn't keep his eyes open. His bruised ribs throbbed, every breath a pointed reminder of how powerless he felt. Before crashing in the guest room, he noticed a photo on the wall. Jackson standing next to a gruff older man in martial arts attire, an arm draped around Jackson's shoulder. A sign behind them read, "Paxton Farm Training Grounds." "That some fancy retreat?" Adrian asked, half smiling. Jackson set his mug down. "Kind of. It's a place up in the hills outside the city, run by a guy named Duncan Grant. He's, a legend in certain circles. Teaches discipline, martial arts, that sort of thing." Curiosity flickered in Adrian's tired eyes. "You trained there?" "A while back, yeah. Helped me get in shape and clear my head. If you ever want an intro, I still know folks there." Adrian didn't respond right away, but in the quiet that followed, his mind replayed the moment Darius's fist slammed into his jaw. He swallowed the bitter taste of helplessness. "Let me sleep on it." Jackson clapped him lightly on the shoulder. "Sure thing. Tomorrow's a new day." Morning brought weak sunlight filtering through half-closed blinds. Adrian woke with a dull ache all over. The bruises from Darius's attack hadn't faded, but the rest had done him good. He found Jackson in the kitchen, scrolling on his phone while munching a leftover slice of pizza. "Mornin'," Jackson said around a mouthful. "Coffee's in the pot." Adrian poured himself a cup, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety twisting in his stomach. Where do I go from here? The question replayed endlessly in his head. Facing Selena in divorce court? Or worse, confronting Darius again? Jackson set down his phone. "So, I talked to a buddy who's still at Paxton Farm. They have an open enrollment for new students next week. Could be a chance to meet Duncan Grant." Adrian hesitated, heat prickling the back of his neck. I don't know, man. I'm not exactly a martial arts guy. That's kind of the point, Jackson said, voice firm but friendly. It's not just about punching people. Duncan's big on discipline, mental focus, self-esteem, could give you space to figure out your next steps away from all the chaos. Adrian sipped his coffee, gaze drifting out the window. The sky was a pale, cloudless blue, a stark contrast to last night's rain. Maybe I do need distance, he thought. Being cooped up in the city, replaying Selena's betrayal, was driving him insane. Let's just take a drive, Jackson suggested, reading Adrian's indecision. It's only a couple hours out. We can check out the place, see if it's for you. Despite the swirling doubts, Adrian agreed. 2 hours later, they were winding along a rural highway, passing farmland and distant rolling hills. The air out here smelled of hay and damp earth. Adrian found himself glancing at every fence, every barn, a tingle of anticipation mixing with nerves. Eventually, they pulled into a gravel lot beside a weathered wooden arch that read Paxton Farm. A couple of lean, athletic people jogged by, offering curt nods. Jackson parked. Looks like training is in session. He pointed to a large open-air structure part barn, part dojo, where about 5 or 6 students practiced controlled movements under the watchful eye of a tall, older man. That's him, Jackson said quietly. Duncan Grant. Duncan wore loose-fitting training pants and a gray t-shirt. Though his hair was streaked with silver, he carried himself with the upright grace of someone half his age. Adrian felt an odd mix of intimidation and respect, just observing from a distance. They approached, the crunch of gravel underfoot announcing their arrival. Duncan paused his demonstration, steel-gray eyes flicking to Adrian. He nodded to the students, who continued their drills, then walked over. Jackson Ward, Duncan greeted, voice resonant with an almost fatherly warmth. Been a while. Jackson grinned, shaking the man's hand. Yeah, good to see you, sir. This is my friend, Adrian Hale. He's thinking about joining your program. Duncan's gaze shifted to Adrian, sweeping him from head to toe in a single assessing glance. You have the look of someone who's come through a storm, he said gently, eyes lingering on the faint bruise at Adrian's jawline. We all have our reasons for being here. Adrian's heart thudded. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Something about Duncan's calm yet piercing gaze made him feel both exposed and strangely safe. Before Adrian could gather himself, Duncan moved with startling speed, a subtle shift in his stance. His hand flashed out, aiming a light tap near Adrian's shoulder a test. Adrian flinched, half-stepping back. Instinct kicked in, and he raised an arm to block. It was clumsy, but it was still a block. Duncan lowered his hand, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Seems your reflexes aren't half bad, he said, stepping back. Care to stay for a lesson? Adrian exhaled, adrenaline coursing through him. He exchanged a quick look with Jackson, who nodded encouragement. I'd like that, Adrian replied. Duncan beckoned them both forward. Let's see what we can do. In that moment, amid the rustic scent of hay and the distant sound of trainees striking heavy bags, Adrian felt the first flicker of something he'd long thought lost, a sense of hope. Sunlight leaked through a dozen cracks in the barn's roof, dust motes dancing in the beams. Adrian stood on worn-out mats, wearing a borrowed pair of track pants and an old t-shirt Jackson had dug up from his trunk. Across from him, a younger trainee held padded mitts, bracing for Adrian's punches. His knuckles throbbed from the repeated impact, though the mitts dampened the force. Sweat trickled down his back, and every breath reminded him of the bruises Darius left. Yet a buzz of determination pushed him to keep going. Stay centered, Duncan Grant called from the side, arms crossed. His voice had that grounded calm that made you want to focus. Feet shoulder-width apart. Exhale when you strike. Adrian tried to follow the instructions. He jabbed, hooking his right arm, stepping into the motion. It wasn't exactly graceful. The mitts jerked backward, the trainee offering a polite, good job, before repositioning. Nearby, Serena Grant Duncan's daughter observed with narrowed eyes. She was tall, lean, wearing a simple black tank top and leggings. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat ponytail. Though her expression was unreadable, Adrian sensed a flicker of skepticism. Maybe it was the slight arch of her eyebrow. "Focus on your form," Serena remarked, stepping closer. "Your stance is shaky. If you don't fix your balance, you'll go down easy." Adrian swallowed. He knew she was right. "I'm trying," he muttered, voice tight. "Been a rough couple days." "Rough days don't matter once you step on the mat," she shot back calmly. "Your body and your mind have to be here right now." She pressed her foot against his ankle, nudging it outward a half-inch. "There, better base. Try again." He gave a quick nod, then jabbed again, slightly more controlled. Serena's eyes flicked to her father, as if silently acknowledging Adrian's small improvement. Duncan remained stoic, arms folded, but Adrian didn't miss the approving tilt of his head. They carried on for another hour, practicing basic strikes and blocks. Every set left Adrian panting, though he clung to that raw determination like a lifeline. The memory of Darius's punch still simmered in his mind, fueling each swing. By late afternoon, training tapered off. Duncan dismissed the class, and most of the trainees drifted away to clean up in a makeshift locker area. Adrian collapsed onto a bench, heart thudding. He felt battered, yet oddly alive. Serena approached, handing him a water bottle. "Not bad for a beginner." Her tone was neutral, but not cold. "Though I'm guessing you have more reasons than just fitness to push so hard." Adrian drank greedily. "Yeah, let's just say I'm tired of feeling helpless." She studied him, curiosity flickering in her dark eyes. "We've seen people come here with all kinds of troubles. As long as you're willing to put in the work, my father will teach you." He attempted a half-smile. "I'm ready." Despite the sweat, exhaustion, and throbbing bruises, something about Paxton Farm felt right. A place where he could bury his rage under purposeful action, maybe even transform it into strength. Serena opened her mouth to speak, but Duncan's voice echoed from across the barn. "Serena, let's show him the next drill before we wrap up." She nodded and started walking away. Over her shoulder, she added softly, "Get up, newbie. I'll show you how to block a side kick without busting your rib again." A faint chuckle escaped Adrian's lips. He forced himself to his feet. Here goes nothing. The lights inside Paxton Farm's main lodge were dim and cozy by evening. Adrian peeled off his sweat-soaked t-shirt, wincing at the bruises he found beneath. A dull ache throbbed where Darius's boots had landed. "At least I'm not bleeding," he told himself grimly. Jackson had already headed back to the city, leaving Adrian to figure out lodging. Duncan, surprisingly hospitable, offered him a spare bunk in a rustic cabin near the orchard. "Stay as long as you need," he'd said. "We'll settle details tomorrow." Now Adrian stood under the shower's lukewarm trickle. The water pressure was pitiful, but it washed away the grime of training. He closed his eyes, letting the gentle cascade run down his back. Suddenly an image flashed. Selena's cold gaze, Darius's smirk. He flinched. The memory of fists impacting his ribs felt too real. His breath caught, and the shower walls felt too close. He yanked the faucet off and grabbed a thin towel, heart pounding. Later that night, he found himself tossing on a narrow bunk. Outside, cicadas hummed in the mild summer air. A single lamp in the corner threw soft shadows around the cabin's wooden walls. No matter how he positioned himself, his bruises protested. Eventually, he dozed off only to snap awake sometime past midnight, heart hammering. Nightmare. He dreamed of Darius slamming him onto the concrete while Selena watched with that bitter little smile. Adrian rubbed his face, sweat beading on his forehead. Someone knocked lightly on the cabin door. He tensed, then realized it must be one of the staff. When he opened it, Serena stood outside, arms crossed beneath a thin hoodie. The moonlight illuminated her features, giving her eyes a sharp glint. "You okay?" she asked, voice hushed. "I heard some noise." Adrian exhaled, leaning against the doorframe. "Bad dream," he admitted, embarrassment creeping in. "Didn't mean to wake anybody." She shrugged. "Happens when your mind's overloaded." A pause. "I've seen it before. Folks come here running from something." She studied him for a beat. "My father might say training can calm the storm in your head, but if that storm's big, it'll take time." Adrian forced a shaky grin. Time, right. I'm not exactly patient. No one is at first. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Try focusing on your breathing if it happens again. Slow, steady inhales. It's no magic pill, but it can help. He nodded, the tension in his chest easing ever so slightly. Thanks. She lingered, as if weighing whether to say more. Finally, she stepped back from the threshold. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll see if you can block a kick without falling flat on your face. A half-smile tugged at Adrian's lips. Deal. Serena turned away, footsteps light on the cabin porch. Adrian closed the door behind her. The cicadas outside continued their night song, and the air felt calmer somehow. He returned to the bunk, mind still churning with resentment, fear, and a cautious spark of hope. Clutching the thin blanket, he inhaled slowly, steadily. For the first time since the beating, he felt like he wasn't entirely drowning. Maybe, just maybe, Paxton Farm could teach him more than how to fight. Perhaps it would give him the space to rebuild himself from the ground up. He shut his eyes, letting the hush of the farm lull him back to sleep. The late morning sun sliced through the rafters of Paxton Farm's training barn, lighting up swirls of dust in the air. Adrian Hale could feel the heat radiating off the heavy bag in front of him, each punch sending echoes across the wooden floor. His knuckles were taped, arms trembling from fatigue, but he refused to let up. Faster, Duncan Grant called out, his voice echoing from where he stood by the wall, arms folded. Put your hips into it. Don't rely on just your shoulders. Adrian inhaled sharply, shifting his stance. Sweat trickled down his forehead, staining the edge of his brow. He launched another flurry of punches, a swift one too, followed by a right hook. The heavy bag swung violently, chain rattling overhead. From the corner of his eye, he caught Serena Grant observing. Her posture was rigid, a slight frown lining her forehead. She'd been critical, often merciless during training, but it was that attitude that pushed him beyond his perceived limits. Your footwork's better, she said tersely. But if you loosen your guard like that in a real match, you're done. Adrian stepped back, chest heaving. Thanks for the vote of confidence, he muttered, half smiling despite the jab. Beneath his exhaustion, he felt a spark of pride that his technique was improving at all. Duncan cleared his throat, stepping forward. Take a break, Adrian. His gaze flicked to the rest of the trainees practicing various drills around the barn, kicks, elbow strikes, grapples. You've made progress these past weeks, he went on, tone calm and measured. Faster reflexes, better stamina. But keep in mind, strength is only half the battle. Adrian nodded, grabbing a towel from a nearby bench. The memory of how he'd been helpless against Darius Blake still festered at the back of his mind. Some nights, the humiliation gnawed at him, fueling his drive to train harder. He wasn't just learning to punch or kick, he was forging a shield against that lingering sense of vulnerability. He wandered to a bucket of ice water near the door, dunking his hands to relieve the ache in his knuckles. That was when Serena appeared at his side, arms crossed. She wore a simple gray tank top and athletic leggings, sweat glistening on her own skin. Don't get cocky just because you can land a few combos, she warned, though her voice held a trace of something softer. Real fights aren't controlled, they're chaos. Adrian forced a laugh. I've had my fair share of chaos, he replied quietly, recalling the brutal day Selena and Darius had taken over his home. I'm not looking to show off, just want to make sure I'm never that defenseless again. Serena studied his expression, then gave a small nod as if understanding. Keep working then, she said. We'll spar this afternoon. A flutter of both nerves and excitement rose in Adrian's chest. Sparring with Serena was a surefire way to end up bruised, but it was also the best test of how far he'd come. Deal, he breathed. The afternoon sun mellowed into a warm glow that bathed the orchard near the farm. After hours of intense drills and non-nonsense critiques, Adrian was grateful for any moment of calm. He found himself walking along the edge of the property, inhaling the earthy scent of grass and distant pine. His ribs still twinged from a sparring session earlier. Serena had caught him off guard with a spinning kick, sending him stumbling. But beneath the discomfort, a flicker of exhilaration lingered. He was getting sharper, faster, more controlled. Suddenly, he spotted Serena sitting on a low wooden fence, gazing out at the rolling hills that stretched toward the horizon. Her dark hair was pulled into a ponytail, a few loose strands framing her face. For a second, Adrian considered turning around, not wanting to intrude. But then she glanced back and their eyes met. "You look like you lost a fight with a brick wall," she remarked, voice level. Yet a faint smile tugged at her lips. Adrian gingerly rubbed the bruise near his collarbone. "That's kinda what sparring with you felt like," he teased, stepping closer. "Mind if I join you?" She shrugged. "Suit yourself." There was no malice in her tone, so Adrian took it as an invitation. He climbed up, leaning on the fence, letting the gentle evening breeze cool his sweat-damped skin. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching as two farmhands led horses across a nearby paddock. The sunset painted the sky in hues of gold and lavender. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian finally said. "You seem driven." "More than just a trainer helping her father. Is there a story there?" Serena's gaze flicked to him, guarded. "Everyone has a story," she replied softly. She paused as though weighing how much to reveal. "My mom died when I was 10, cancer. Dad raised me here, taught me everything he knows about martial arts, discipline, survival." She exhaled, eyes distant. "I guess it became my life's anchor." Adrian felt a pang of empathy. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Losing a parent that young must have been tough." She nodded, lips pressing together. "Yeah, but it made me strong in its own way. I learned early that life can be cruel, so you'd better be ready." A fleeting vulnerability crossed her features, quickly replaced by the usual cool confidence. "What about you?" she asked. "You training just to get back at someone?" Adrian hesitated. He wasn't sure how much to divulge about Selena and Darius, about the humiliation that still knotted his stomach. "Something like that," he admitted quietly. "Had a falling out with people I once trusted. I'm not looking for revenge." He paused, his voice turning raw. "I just don't want to feel helpless again." Serena studied him carefully. Then, surprising him, she reached out and lightly touched the bruise on his shoulder, a spot he'd acquired during their last spar. It was a fleeting gesture, gentle and warm, sending an unexpected tingle down Adrian's spine. "You're not helpless," she said, voice uncharacteristically soft. Her gaze lingered on him, and the air between them felt charged in a way he hadn't anticipated. Before either could speak, they heard Duncan's voice calling in the distance. Serena cleared her throat, pulled back her hand, and hopped off the fence. Adrian followed, heart thumping oddly. He couldn't ignore the way that tiny moment had stirred something in him, a fragile sense of closeness, beyond all the bruises and training. And for the first time since his life was upended, he felt a flicker of hope, not just for his physical strength, but for the possibility of moving on. Later that night, the moon hung high, casting silver light over the dirt paths around the cabins. Adrian, still restless, was finishing up a late run around the perimeter, a suggestion from Duncan to build endurance. His lungs burned, each exhale a visible puff in the cool air. Returning to his cabin, he found Serena waiting outside, arms folded. She wore a black hoodie zipped up to her chin. "Couldn't sleep?" Adrian asked, panting. She lifted a shoulder in a half shrug. "Wanted some fresh air. Figured I might catch you on the way back." He wiped sweat from his brow. "Lucky timing." A slight awkwardness hovered, the memory of their earlier moment on the fence fresh in his mind. Serena tilted her head. "Let me see that bruise," she said, nodding at the purplish spot under his collarbone. Caught off guard, Adrian hesitated, but she stepped closer, gently tugging the collar of his shirt to examine the mark. "Doesn't look too bad," she murmured, voice quieter than usual. Her proximity made his heart pound. The tension wasn't purely about training or bruises. Something about the silent night and the faint glow from the cabin's porch light wrapped them in a cocoon of awareness. Without warning, her gaze flicked up to his, and in a heartbeat, Adrian found himself leaning in. Their lips met soft at first, a gentle brush that sent a rush of warmth through his entire body. The weight of all their sparring sessions, all the guarded exchanges, all the unspoken understanding, culminated in that single spark. Serena pulled back, eyes wide. 1,000 unspoken questions seemed to hang between them. Then she exhaled, swallowing hard. "We should, Yeah," he whispered, heart rattling like a drum. "We should probably take it slow?" She nodded, stepping back slightly. But there was a tenderness in her eyes that Adrian hadn't seen before. "Good night, Adrian," she murmured, turning toward her cabin. Her voice trembled just a fraction. Adrian stood there for a long moment, night air tingling against his skin. He sensed things were about to change, maybe for the better, maybe for the complicated. But for once, that possibility didn't scare him. It felt like a new door creaking open, letting hope shine through. A crisp, chilly morning greeted Adrian as he walked into the farm's main dining hall. Students were scattered across rough-hewn tables, talking in hushed tones over oatmeal and coffee. Normally, the low hum of conversation was soothing, but today, he noticed a ripple of concern. In the corner, Terry Malone, Adrian's old neighbor, stood out like a fish on land, having just arrived in a beat-up SUV. He spotted Adrian and waved him over urgently. "Terry?" Adrian set down his half-empty mug. "What are you doing all the way out here?" Terry glanced around, voice hushed. "I tried calling you, but your phone was off or something. I've got news." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Darius Blake's been making a name for himself in the local boxing scene. He's winning fights left and right, all short bouts. Word is he's got a big shot at turning pro." Adrian's gut twisted. Despite his newfound focus at the farm, hearing Darius's name still ignited that old dread. "He always was strong," he muttered. "Why'd you come all this way to tell me?" Terry cleared his throat. "I also heard from some mutual friend that Selena's been bragging about how Adrian can train all he wants, but he's never going to match Darius." His expression darkened. "Look, I know you said you're done with that life, but I thought you should know what's floating around out there." Adrian's heartbeat hammered. The room seemed to buzz with tension. She's still taunting me? He wasn't sure if it stung or fueled him. Maybe both. Serena, who'd just stepped in to grab breakfast, caught sight of Adrian's stricken face. She approached, eyebrows knitted. "Everything okay?" Adrian forced a smile that felt hollow. "Yeah, just some old baggage catching up." He shot a glance at Terry. "Thanks for letting me know." Once Terry left to find coffee, Serena searched Adrian's eyes. "Something about Selena, right?" she guessed quietly. "You look rattled." He swallowed, nodding. "She's still pushing my buttons, I guess. And apparently, the guy who roughed me up is climbing the boxing ranks. I can't say I'm surprised, but it bothers me more than it should." Her gaze softened, though her tone remained direct. "Let it bother you if that's how you feel, but don't let it derail everything you've built here." She paused, voice dropping. "I've seen people let anger consume them. It ends ugly." Adrian exhaled, recalling Duncan Grant's repeated reminders that mental clarity mattered as much as physical skill. "I know. Doesn't make it easy." Serena touched his shoulder gently. "If you want to spar extra or do more bag work, let me know. Just don't fight ghosts. Fight for yourself." A small smile tugged at his lips. He nodded, a swirl of gratitude and affection rising. "Thanks. I appreciate it." Across the hall, he caught Duncan's watchful gaze. The older man gave a slight nod as if sensing something had shifted in Adrian's resolve. Adrian returned the nod. One day, maybe, he'd face Darius again. But for now, he had to channel every ounce of that lingering resentment into disciplined training, not reckless fury. 3 weeks later, the dusty smell of chalk and stale sweat filled the local boxing gym, a modest place Duncan had recommended. Rows of faded fight posters lined the cinderblock walls, legends from decades past. Jim Coulter, a seasoned trainer with salt and pepper hair, greeted Adrian with a firm handshake. "Duncan told me about you," Jim said, sizing Adrian up. "Said you've got raw drive, picking up the fundamentals fast. You looking to test that in the ring?" Adrian nodded, a flutter of nerves mixing with excitement. "Yes, sir. I'm done getting bullied. I want to see if I can hold my own in a real match." Jim grinned, revealing a gap in his front teeth. "We'll start you off small, friendly bouts, local amateurs. You can't jump straight to big fights, but you'll get the feel." That afternoon, Adrian laced up gloves in a ring scuffed by countless past fights. A handful of spectators, other boxers, random gym-goers milled around. Serena stood outside the ropes, watchful as ever. Duncan had stayed behind at Paxton Farm to train new arrivals, trusting Jim with Adrian's first foray into boxing. His first opponent, a wiry guy named Miguel, not a pro but definitely experienced, stepped into the ring. They touched gloves. Adrenaline surged through Adrian's veins, memory flashing to the day he'd been beaten in his own yard. Not this time, he vowed. When the bell clanged, Miguel lunged in with rapid jabs. Adrian ducked, blocking them with newfound skill. He countered with a cross, landing a clean shot on Miguel's cheek. The crowd murmured. He pressed forward, adrenaline roaring in his ears. In less than 2 minutes, he'd forced Miguel into a corner. A final 1-2 combo sealed the round, and the gym's onlookers let out a burst of applause. Serena's eyes flickered with pride. She offered a subtle nod from the edge of the ring. The following week, Adrian fought 2 more short bouts in the same local circuit. Each time, he triumphed, sometimes swiftly, occasionally with bruises to show for it. Whispers began circulating about the new kid from Paxton Farm. Local boxing blogs posted short blurbs praising his technique and power. At the close of another successful match, Jim Coulter patted Adrian's shoulder in the locker room. "You're good, kid. Not just physically. Your head's in the right place. Duncan's taught you well." Adrian, still catching his breath, glanced at Serena leaning against a nearby wall, arms folded but smiling. His pulse quickened, not just from the fight's remnants, but from the warm look in her eyes. "I've had the best teachers," he said, voice steady. As they headed back to Paxton Farm under a setting sun, Adrian could barely contain the surge of exhilaration. The crunch of gravel under the truck's tires felt like a soundtrack to the new chapter of his life. It wasn't just about learning to fight anymore, it was about reclaiming control, forging a path forward. And Serena by his side, her quiet, unwavering support, added a sense of purpose he'd never expected. By the time they pulled up to the farm, dusk had settled. Duncan was outside, arms folded, waiting like a sentinel. Adrian hopped out, light on his feet despite the lingering ache in his knuckles. "How'd it go?" Duncan asked, arching a brow. Adrian exchanged a grin with Serena. "Third win," she said, pride in her tone. Duncan's stern facade cracked, revealing a small smile. "Good. Sounds like you're ready for bigger challenges if you want them." Adrian nodded, adrenaline still coursing. "I do," he whispered, heart thumping. He glanced at Serena, their shared gaze brimming with unspoken possibility. "I'm ready." And in that hush of the early night, standing under the star-flecked sky, Adrian felt the world open up. For the first time since Selena's betrayal shattered his old life, he had not only hope, but excitement for what lay ahead. A bright fluorescent haze illuminated the crowded boxing arena. Adrian Hale stood behind a vinyl curtain, wrapping tape around his wrists under the watchful eye of Jim Coulter, the grizzled trainer who'd guided Adrian through his first amateur fights. "You've come a long way, kid," Jim muttered, glancing at the lively crowd beyond the barrier. Rows of spectators filled the small stadium, the hum of excitement rippling through the air. "This isn't just another local bout. There'll be reporters, scouts. Keep your head clear." Adrian nodded, flexing his taped fists. Over the past few months, he'd racked up an undefeated record in the regional circuit. Each victory brought more chatter about his aggressive style, and the rumor that he'd trained at Paxton Farm with the mysterious Duncan Grant. Now, he was stepping onto a bigger stage, his first televised fight. A wave of nerves tightened his gut, but behind it simmered a focused determination. Memories of being helpless on his own front lawn still sparked a slow burn in his chest, fueling every jab and uppercut he'd thrown since. At ringside, Serena Grant sat with Duncan, her eyes scanning the ring with calm intensity. Adrian spotted her from across the lights, and she sent him a subtle nod. The smallest flicker of a smile curved his mouth. Having her support meant more than he dared admit. Once the announcer finished bellowing introductions, Adrian ducked between the ropes. His opponent, a lean fighter named Luis Soto, bounced on the balls of his feet, fists raised. The bell clanged, and adrenaline surged through Adrian's veins. He moved with the lethal grace Duncan had hammered into him, footwork swift, punches precise. Within 3 rounds, Adrian dominated. Soto was no pushover, but Adrian's relentless combination of body shots and crosses forced him into a corner. By the time the referee stepped in, Soto's face was swollen, gloves sagging in defeat. The audience roared, cameras flashed. A reporter even mentioned the name Darius Blake in passing, speculating on a future showdown. Back in the locker room, drenched in sweat, Adrian overheard bits of conversation from the corridor. He's unstoppable. Might be the one to beat Darius. He exhaled, unwrapping his hands. The name stung his ears like an old wound. Darius, the man who humiliated him. The man who Selena had flaunted like a trophy. The man Adrian once feared he could never surpass. Jim Coulter poked his head in. Better get used to that talk. The media's hungry for drama. And with Darius racking up his own string of KOs, they want to see who'll blink first. Adrian forced a tight grin, pressing a bag of ice against his knuckles. Well, let them talk, he murmured. Deep down, though, he felt the embers of a long-awaited confrontation flicker to life. A bright midday sun blazed overhead as a surge of spectators crowded into the local civic center. Banners hung along the rafters, each one emblazoned with swirling letters. Blake versus Hale, a clash of unbeatens. The entire atmosphere buzzed with a sense of impending chaos. Adrian paced in the backstage corridor, listening to the distant roar of the crowd. He'd learned only 2 weeks prior that Darius Blake was indeed his next opponent. The hype was off the charts. 2 undefeated fighters, both local, both rumored to have a score to settle. He glanced over at Serena, standing to one side. She gave him a soft, encouraging look. "You're stronger," she reminded him, "and smarter. Don't let his name get in your head." Adrian inhaled slowly, images of that fateful day still etched behind his eyelids. Darius pounding him into the concrete, Selena watching with a cold smirk. "Thanks," he whispered. A surge of emotion and adrenaline coursed through him. This fight felt personal, no matter how many times Duncan or Serena preached discipline. When the time came to enter the ring, camera flashes erupted like strobe lights. The announcer's voice boomed, "Darius Blake, the reigning local phenom!" Applause thundered, and Adrian glimpsed Darius stepping onto the canvas, his cocky grin unchanged from that day. And right beside him, to Adrian's shock, was Selena in a sleek black dress, her face set in a smug, triumphant expression as she leaned on Darius's arm. A knot twisted in Adrian's stomach. For a split second, he felt the old humiliation creeping in. Then, Serena's voice echoed in his memory. "Don't let him live in your head." The bell rang. Darius came out swinging hard, each blow aimed with lethal intent. Adrian dodged, chin tucked, sending back a barrage of counters. The pace was blistering, the crowd going wild. By the 4th round, Adrian's fists dripped with sweat, heartbeat a war drum in his ears. Darius's cockiness was wearing thin. Adrian could see it in the man's darkening eyes. A moment's opening appeared, a sloppy right from Darius left his torso exposed. Adrian seized it, unleashing a savage hook to his ribs, then a crushing uppercut under the chin. Darius staggered. Adrian pressed forward, adrenaline overriding every ache. Punch after punch hammered Darius against the ropes. In that moment, time seemed to slow, and all Adrian saw was the man who had torn his life apart. He pivoted, intending to land a final, devastating blow. But something in him hesitated. Because in Darius's eyes, for a fleeting second, Adrian caught a flicker of fear, maybe even regret. It flashed back to the memory of how he, Adrian, had once been helpless on the ground. The final punch hung midair, raw power waiting to be unleashed. With a ragged breath, Adrian let that finishing blow fall short. Darius slumped to the canvas, half-conscious. The referee intervened, counting him out. Blood seeped from a cut on Darius's brow, and the ring doctor rushed in. A stunned hush gripped the arena. The bell clanged repeatedly, the official raising Adrian's arm. He barely heard the cheers or the announcer's frantic commentary. Selena stood nearby, eyes wide, lips parted in shock. No trace of her usual smugness remained. Adrian stared down at Darius's crumpled form. He could have ended the man's career right then, perhaps even worse. The realization that he'd nearly lost control made his head spin. Without another glance, he stepped away, ignoring the swirling cameras and Selena's stricken face. Serena caught up to him at the ring steps, concern etched into her features. He shook his head, jaw clenched, and she said nothing, simply following him out of the ring. The moment of victory felt hollow, overshadowed by a sense of something much darker that he had narrowly escaped. The next morning, the headlines blared, "Hale destroys Blake in 4." Sports columnists gushed about Adrian's explosive power, some even claiming he was a rising star in the state. But behind all the noise was another grimmer story. Darius had sustained critical injuries. News outlets speculated that his boxing career was likely over. Adrian paced outside a small hospital in the city. Through the glass doors, he spotted a cluster of reporters waiting in the lobby, cameras at the ready. He tugged a cap lower over his eyes, not sure why he'd even come. Guilt gnawed at him, replaying the final moment in the ring, the surge of near-uncontrollable rage. A text from Selena flashed on his phone. "You got what you wanted. Are you happy now?" He stared at the words, a hollow ache blooming in his chest. He wasn't happy, he was haunted. The image of Darius lying bloody on the mat tore through him. Had he slipped too far into the darkness he once despised? That evening back at Paxton Farm, Serena found Adrian alone in the barn, hands wrapped in tape as he pounded a heavy bag long after everyone else had gone. She moved closer, her expression torn between worry and compassion. "Hey," she said softly, "that bag do something to you?" Adrian paused, sweat dripping from his brow. "I can't stop thinking about it," he admitted, voice shaking. I could have killed him, Serena." She sighed, stepping closer. "But you didn't. You stopped." He sank onto a wooden bench, head in his hands. "That anger, it's still inside me. The more I try to bury it, the stronger it gets." He grimaced. "I never wanted to be that kind of monster." Serena knelt in front of him, placing a tentative hand on his knee. "You're not a monster," she said gently, "but you're carrying a lot. Maybe we all saw how deep your scars run." He took a shaky breath, staring at her dark eyes. Her presence grounded him, reminding him that there was more to his journey than vengeance. Yet the guilt stayed, a heavy stone lodged in his chest. He'd beaten Darius, yes, but at what cost to his own peace? Duncan approached from the barn's doorway, arms folded. He didn't speak, merely offered Adrian a solemn nod. Adrian breathed, letting some of the tension drain from his shoulders. He couldn't erase what happened, but he needed to find a way to move on before the anger consumed him completely. A cold rain pattered against the lodge's windows the next week when Adrian received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. Initially, he almost ignored it, but the persistent ring drew him in. He lifted the phone to his ear. "Hello?" A hesitant female voice responded. "Adrian Hale. This is Lorraine, Selena's mother." His heartbeat quickened. Yes. Is Selena okay?" he managed, dread curling in his stomach. He expected another round of accusations or guilt trips. Lorraine sighed on the other end. "She's coping, but my husband and I found out something we think you need to know. It's about Selena's son." Adrian froze. "Son? She has a kid?" He vaguely recalled rumors about Selena possibly being pregnant at one point, but everything had been overshadowed by the affair and the violence that followed. "Yes," Lorraine said softly. "He's almost a year old now. Look, she put Darius's name on the birth certificate, but he looks so much like you. We did some checking. He is yours, Adrian." A rush of emotions crashed over him, shock, confusion, a stab of betrayal. He pressed his free hand against his temple, leaning against the wall. Why wouldn't she tell me?" He heard the tremor in his own voice. "She was afraid you'd take him away," Lorraine confessed. "Afraid you'd fight her in court or do something rash. She was mixed up. And you know how that time was. She was in a bad mental state, under Darius's influence." Adrian's mind swirled. A child, his child. The anger welled up again, mixing with heartbreak. How could Selena keep something so monumental from him? Sure, they'd split under terrible circumstances, but a baby. Lorraine's voice softened. "We'd like you to meet him, or at least talk about arrangements. I'm not forcing anything. But Edmund and we can't watch Selena struggle alone, and it's not fair to keep you both apart." He shut his eyes, heart hammering. Everything felt unreal. Just when he thought he'd faced all the possible fallout from that toxic chapter of his life, a new, deeper wound opened. "I need time to think," he finally said, jaw tight. "But I'll be in touch." When the call ended, Adrian stood motionless for what felt like hours. Rain continued its soft drumming on the glass. Serena found him there, worry flickering in her gaze. "Adrian? You look like you've seen a ghost." He turned to her, eyes burning. "Selena has a son," he whispered, voice thick with betrayal. "He's mine." Serena inhaled sharply. "Oh, God, that's—" Her voice trailed off, unsure how to finish. A torrent of thoughts choked Adrian's mind. The child's face, Selena's deception, the possibility that he was now a father in a life he hadn't asked for. The rage he'd tried so hard to control threatened to flare again, yet under it lay a strange, undeniable ache, like a tether pulling at him. "Serena," he said quietly, "I don't know what to do." She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her own expression conflicted. "We'll figure it out," she promised, though her tone showed she was grappling with the news just as much. "But you don't have to face it alone." He nodded, the tension in his chest refusing to subside. Outside the window, the gray sky matched the storm raging in his soul. For a moment, he wished none of it were true. But reality had crashed in. He had a child, a boy entangled in the toxic threads of his past with Selena and Darius. The question was, how far would he go to claim that role? And what would it cost to do the right thing both for the child and for his own shattered sense of self? Gray clouds drifted across the late afternoon sky as Adrian Hale parked outside a nondescript suburban house. The engine's rumble cut off, leaving a tense hush in its wake. He took a moment to steady his breathing, recalling Lorraine's hushed phone call that insisted Selena would be here, ready to talk. Ready, presumably, to discuss the shocking fact that Adrian had a son he never knew about. He stepped onto the sidewalk, each footstep an echo of pent-up dread. The front door swung open before he even knocked. Selena stood there, arms crossed, face drawn. Gone was the smug confidence he remembered from their last confrontation. Instead, she looked guarded, almost haunted. "Adrian," she said softly, clearing her throat. "Come in." Inside, the small living room smelled faintly of lavender air freshener. Overstuffed couches and a neatly arranged coffee table suggested Lorraine's meticulous touch. Edmund, Selena's father, hovered near the hallway, offering Adrian a nod of strained politeness. They all settled awkwardly in the living room. Lorraine gently closed the door, then sat beside her husband, leaving Adrian and Selena opposite each other. For a long moment, no one spoke. The tension was palpable, like an unseen wire stretched tight across the room. Selena inhaled. I should apologize. Keeping you in the dark about our baby was wrong." Her gaze flickered to her hands. "I was terrified you'd try to take him from me, especially after everything that happened with Darius. I was not in a good place." Adrian fought the swirl of anger that threatened to surface. "Terrified or not," he said, voice laced with bitterness, "you robbed me of my right to know my son. That's not something you can excuse by saying you weren't in a good place." She winced but didn't argue. Instead, she nodded, eyes glistening. "He's 14 months old," she said quietly. "His name is Caleb." At the mention of the child's name, Adrian felt a jolt in his chest, equal parts rage and an unexpected tenderness. He swallowed, forcing composure. "Where is he?" Lorraine answered gently. "He's in the bedroom napping." Adrian clenched his fists on his knees, unsure if he wanted to see the boy yet or if he needed more time to process. Memories of Selena and Darius ridiculing him flashed in his mind, stirring an old fury, but overshadowing that was the crushing truth. He was a father. Selena drew a shaky breath. "I want you to meet him, but I understand if you need space. I never planned for us to be here like this." She closed her eyes, tears threatening. "All I can say is, I'm sorry." Silence blanketed the room once more. Finally, Adrian pushed to his feet, the enormity of the situation threatening to buckle his resolve. "Let me see him," he whispered, throat tight. "I at least owe him that much." Selena exhaled shakily, standing as well. With Edmund and Lorraine giving them privacy, she led Adrian down a short hallway. His heart pounded in his ears. Peeking into the dim bedroom, he saw a small crib. Inside, the toddler slept soundly, soft tufts of hair curling at the temples. And in that instant, Adrian's anger wavered under a tidal wave of unexpected emotion. He rested a hand on the crib's edge, gaze locking on the child's peaceful features. A flicker of recognition, Caleb's nose, the shape of his brow mirrored Adrian's own. 1,000 words jammed in his throat, refusing to emerge. Behind him, Selena stood in silence, letting the moment speak for itself. Adrian blinked back tears he never expected to have. Life, once again, had thrown him a punch from nowhere, and this time, he wasn't sure how to fight back. The following week was a whirlwind of legal consultations, tense phone calls, and restless nights. Adrian found himself at a downtown law firm, perched in a leather chair opposite his new attorney, Melissa Tucker, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who'd handled countless custody disputes. Melissa pushed a stack of papers forward. Given that Selena placed Darius on the birth certificate, we'll need a formal paternity test to confirm your biological relationship. We can petition for sole or joint custody once that's established. Adrian stared at the pages, mind buzzing with doubt. I never wanted a courtroom battle, he murmured. I want to do right by my son, but I'm not out to tear him away from his mother. Melissa nodded sympathetically. That's your call, but if Selena fights you, we need to be prepared. Outside the office, the midday sun felt too bright on Adrian's face. He dialed Serena. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said gently. How'd the meeting go? Feels like I'm stepping onto another battlefield, he admitted, leaning against a marble column. But I can't just walk away. He's my kid. There was a pause. I get it, Serena replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Just promise me you won't let bitterness drive you. Caleb deserves more than anger. A flicker of relief touched Adrian's chest. Thanks, he murmured. Means a lot that you understand. That evening, Edmund and Lorraine invited Adrian over again, hoping to mediate a gentler arrangement. Over coffee and hushed conversation, they expressed their desire to avoid dragging Caleb through a bitter custody war. Selena, looking exhausted, apologized yet again for her secrecy, insisting she would cooperate with any plan that allowed Adrian to be in Caleb's life without upheaval. Adrian gazed at the toddler, who toddled unsteadily across the living room floor. His heart twisted each time Caleb's wide eyes flicked upward, curiosity brimming. The child might not grasp who Adrian was right now, but a strange and powerful pull tugged him closer. He crouched low, stretching out a hand, letting Caleb grip his finger with tiny fists. From across the room, Serena watched quietly, having come to provide Adrian with moral support. Her expression was guarded, supportive, yet clearly worried about the emotional minefield ahead. After a lengthy discussion, they agreed on a tentative solution. Caleb would spend part of each week with Adrian. Once the paternity test was confirmed, everyone hoped that slow integration would help Caleb adjust. They decided to leave the lawyers out of it unless conflict arose. Later in the driveway, as Adrian strapped on his seatbelt, Selena stood outside the car. Thank you, she murmured. I know you didn't ask for any of this. He turned the key, engine rumbling to life. Neither did he, Adrian replied, a trace of sorrow lacing his voice. But we'll figure it out. For Caleb. As he pulled away, he caught Serena's gaze in the passenger seat, an unspoken mix of relief and concern. The stakes were higher than any fight in a ring. For the first time, Adrian realized that protecting and nurturing someone else's life might be the hardest battle of all. A crisp fall breeze rustled the trees as Adrian stepped out of his car, gazing up at the sprawling property nestled in the foothills. The old ski resort dubbed Mountain Adventure in faded lettering spanned acres of rugged terrain, dotted with disused cabins and overgrown trails. Broken windows, sagging roofs, and peeling paint told stories of a once bustling retreat fallen into disrepair. Serena hopped out from the passenger side, pushing her hair out of her eyes. You sure about this? She asked, the corners of her mouth quirking with both amusement and doubt. This place needs more than a facelift, it needs a resurrection. Adrian chuckled, inhaling the pine-scented air. Yeah, I'm sure. I've got money saved from the fights, plus a few sponsors interested. I need something fresh, a way to build a future that isn't just about boxing." He paused. "For me and for Caleb." They picked their way through piles of debris, noting the structural damage. Yet beneath the decay, Adrian saw potential. A lodge with panoramic mountain views, cabins that could be restored into cozy rentals, the possibility of creating a family-friendly getaway, something that would help him move beyond the bitterness that once consumed him. Over the next weeks, negotiations with the property's owner edged forward. Adrian spent countless hours on calls with banks, contractors, and a real estate lawyer. Word spread that he intended to transform the abandoned resort into a year-round retreat, complete with nature trails and winter sports. That was when Selena unexpectedly approached him with a proposition. "I have a background in accounting, you know," she said one afternoon, meeting him at a cafe near the site. Her tone was calm, almost businesslike. "If you let me handle the financial side, payroll, budgeting, I can keep things organized. It might also give me more time with Caleb when he's with you." Adrian's instinctive reaction was to recoil at the idea of working with the woman who'd caused him so much pain, but practicality nudged him. He was in over his head financially, juggling fatherhood and his ongoing boxing career. A second pair of hands, someone he could trust not to sabotage him, might help. He glanced at Selena, trying to gauge her sincerity. She seemed earnest, regret shadowing her eyes. "All right," he said finally, "but if we do this, we keep it professional. And if you pull anything remotely underhanded—" He let the threat hang in the air. She nodded, exhaling as though relieved. "Understood." When he told Serena about the plan, she raised an eyebrow. "You sure you can handle that kind of proximity to Selena? Working side by side?" Adrian shrugged. "I have to try. For the business, for Caleb. She's not my partner in life, but she can be a partner in making this project work." Standing amid the construction chaos, listening to hammers and saws echo against the backdrop of rustling pines, Adrian felt a flicker of something he hadn't truly grasped in a long time: optimism. Even if it meant navigating a delicate alliance with Selena, even if it tested his relationship with Serena, the idea of building mountain adventure ignited a spark of hope. Maybe a place to let go of old wounds and finally move forward. Late afternoon sunlight poured through the tall windows of a makeshift office Adrian had set up inside the half-renovated lodge. Stacks of blueprints and financial reports cluttered a wooden desk. Selena tapped away at a laptop, occasionally frowning at expense figures. On the wall, a calendar bristled with sticky notes marking investor meetings, contractor deadlines, and visits from local officials. Halfway through reviewing a budget breakdown, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Jim Coulter. "Hey, Jim, what's up?" The veteran trainer's gruff voice carried excitement. "Got a call from a big promoter in the city. They want you in a headliner Fight Light heavyweight championship bracket. This is the real deal, kid." Adrian's stomach flipped. Ever since his victory over Darius, he'd gained serious attention from bigger promoters. But between the new fatherhood obligations and the lodge project, he'd debated scaling back on boxing altogether. "When?" he asked warily. 2 months from now," Jim said. "Plenty of time to train up at Paxton Farm if you want, or somewhere else. They're offering good money, could help that new venture of yours." Adrian hung up, heart pounding. Across the table, Selena arched an eyebrow. "Something big?" he exhaled. "A shot at the light heavyweight belt." The words felt surreal leaving his mouth. He glanced at the scattered paperwork for mountain adventure, then recalled the image of Caleb's tiny hand gripping his finger. "Do I still want this?" he wondered. That evening, after dropping off Caleb at Selena's for her share of custody, Adrian drove to Serena's cabin at Paxton Farm. The porch light cast a warm glow across the wooden steps where she waited, arms folded. "Jim told me the news," she said, as soon as he stepped out of his car. "A championship fight, this is what you always aimed for, right?" He joined her, shoulders taut. "I used to think so. But now there's Caleb, the lodge I'm torn. Fighting for a belt means intense training, total focus. I can't be half in." Serena's eyes reflected the same mix of concern and pride. "I get it. But if you walk away now, will you regret it?" She paused, voice gentle. Sometimes finishing what you start is how you make peace with your past. Adrian gazed out at the moonlit fields surrounding Paxton Farm, memories stirring. The days of feeling powerless, the nights of training until his body screamed, the heartbreak that led him here in the first place. Could winning that belt truly bring closure? Or was it just another rung on a never-ending ladder? He sighed, meeting Serena's gaze. I'll do it. One last fight. Win or lose, I'm calling it after that. I've got too many people counting on me. A warm flicker of something admiration, relief passed over her face. She placed a hand on his cheek, and he leaned into the touch, the night air cool around them. Then let's do it, she whispered. I'll be with you every step. As they stood on that porch under the quiet stars, Adrian felt a strange calm settle in his chest. He'd entered boxing consumed by anger, searching for revenge. Now, he would see it through for himself, for his son, and for the future he was finally learning how to build. A chilly dawn broke over Paxton Farm, its rolling hills cloaked in pale mist. The muted glow of the sun barely pierced the horizon as Adrian Hale drove up the gravel path. Windows rolled down to let in the crisp autumn air. He parked beside the barn where he'd honed his skills months before, stepping out to see Duncan Grant waiting on the porch, arms folded. "You're here earlier than I expected," Duncan remarked, nodding with a trace of approval. Adrian simply shrugged. "This last fight might be my biggest yet. Might as well give it everything." They headed inside, flicking on overhead lights that revealed rows of punching bags, training mats, and free weights. The faint smell of sweat and sawdust lingered, familiar yet electrifying. Serena Grant appeared from behind a stack of training gear, hair pulled into a tight ponytail. Her gaze flicked between Adrian and her father, curiosity mingled with encouragement. "Did you sleep at all?" she teased lightly, noticing the faint shadows under Adrian's eyes. "Barely," he admitted. "Too much on my mind." "The press keeps calling. Folks want interviews. And I've got Caleb for a couple days before flying out to Vegas." Serena's expression softened at the mention of Adrian's son. "Well, I'll keep them off your back as best I can," she offered, a gentle determination in her tone. Over the months, she'd become both his partner and his anchor, helping manage the emotional chaos that came with fatherhood and boxing stardom. Duncan clapped his hands, drawing them back into the practical reality of training. "Enough talking. Gear up. Let's see if your footwork's gotten rusty." Adrian grinned, slipping on gloves and adjusting his stance. The next few hours felt like a return to basics intense bag work, rapid sparring with Serena, non-stop drills under Duncan's sharp-eyed supervision. Every bead of sweat reminded Adrian why he'd started this journey and how far he'd come. During a break, he leaned against a post, gulping water. Serena approached quietly, wiping sweat from her brow. "You know," she said, breathing hard, "the media's calling this the biggest light heavyweight showdown in years. You ready for that spotlight?" Adrian exhaled, heart pounding. "Not entirely sure, but I need to face it. Win or lose, I'm done after this. I have a business to run, a son who needs me, and a future that isn't just about fighting." Serena's lips curved into a small smile. "Exactly what I love to hear," she murmured, voice low enough that Duncan couldn't overhear. She patted Adrian's shoulder before heading back to the ring, leaving him with a surge of warmth in his chest. By the time dusk fell, every muscle in Adrian's body ached. He loaded back into his car, waved farewell to Duncan, and watched the barn lights recede in the rearview mirror. Whatever doubts still lingered, training at Paxton Farm again had reinforced his resolve. One last fight. Then a new chapter. 2 weeks later, Las Vegas shimmered under neon lights, the air thick with excitement and the scent of late-night possibility. The fight venue was a sprawling arena, dazzling with jumbotron screens and cheering crowds. The marquee read, Adrian Hale versus Miguel Romero Light Heavyweight Championship. Backstage, Adrian tried to focus on his breathing, shutting out the roar of the audience. Jim Coulter, his longtime trainer, readied him with final instructions, tape-wrapping Adrian's wrists tight as a vice. Outside the dressing room, Serena paced with restless energy, occasionally peeking in to give him an encouraging nod. "You're prepared," Jim reminded him, voice gruff. "Don't overthink. Stick to the plan, jab, move, watch for his combos." Adrian exhaled, recalling the endless hours at Paxton Farm, the punishing drills, the footwork practice. "Got it," he said, chest fluttering with anticipation. A buzz signaled time to head toward the ring. Spotlights swept across the crowd, music pounding through the speakers. Adrian walked the tunnel, flanked by his small team, the bright lights almost blinding. A thunderous cheer rose as he emerged. Opposite him, Miguel Romero paced in his corner, bouncing on his toes, a picture of unwavering confidence. Round one started at a blistering pace. Miguel advanced with a flurry of punches, forcing Adrian to block and dodge. The champion's reflexes were razor-sharp. Every attempt Adrian made to counter found Romero's guard ready. By the second round, Adrian's ribs felt bruised from a series of body shots that snuck past his blocks. In round 3, a glancing right hook staggered Adrian, the world spinning for a breathless second. The referee nearly intervened, but Adrian shook off the daze, rallying with a desperate combination. The crowd roared, sensing the high-stakes drama. Between rounds, he slumped onto his stool, chest heaving. Jim pressed an ice pack against his neck, grim-faced. "You're letting him set the pace," he snapped. "Use that speed we drilled. Don't stand there trading with him." Round 4 opened with a surprising shift. Adrian danced around Romero's attempts to corner him, firing crisp jabs to the champion's face. Blood trickled from Romero's nose, fueling the arena's frenzy. They each landed fierce hits, sweat and adrenaline mixing in a chaotic symphony under the bright lights. As the fight wore on, every nerve in Adrian's body screamed with fatigue, but he clung to the memory of nights he'd spent powerless on a concrete patio. He refused to be that man again. In round 7, a blow from Romero hammered Adrian's temple, knees buckling. He saw Serena's face in the corner of his vision, her hands clasped, fear etched across her features. Then came the flash of Caleb's smiling face in Adrian's mind, the reality of the new life he was building mountain adventure, the possibility of a stable family. Summoning a last burst of energy, Adrian threw a precise combination that drove Romero to the ropes. The champion recovered, trading blows in a vicious exchange that left both fighters gasping at the bell. By the final round, the crowd stood, hearts pounding in unison with the fighters. Adrian felt the surge of near defeat turn into raw determination. As Romero swung wide, Adrian slipped left, sending a thunderous counterpunch that snapped Romero's head back. A follow-up uppercut connected solidly with Romero's jaw. The champion wilted, stumbling to the canvas. The referee counted, flashbulbs popping, the arena shaking with excitement. At the count of 10, Romero still hadn't risen. The roar that erupted was deafening. Adrian, chest burning, raised his gloves in disbelieving triumph. The ring announcer's voice thundered through the speakers, "And the new light heavyweight champion, Adrian Hale!" The sterile scent of disinfectant filled the small hospital room. Battered by the long, punishing fight, Adrian had collapsed backstage from exhaustion and the aftermath of Romero's blows. Now, an IV dripped into his arm, monitors beeping softly nearby. The world felt oddly distant. Painkillers dulled his throbbing limbs, but his mind still buzzed with the memory of the ring's thunderous ovation. Serena sat at his bedside, her eyes red from worry and lack of sleep. When she noticed Adrian stir, she offered a wobbly smile. "You gave us a scare," she murmured, slipping a hand into his. "They say you'll be fine after some rest." He squeezed her fingers, relief and exhaustion mingling. "Guess the doc wants me to take a break from getting punched in the head," he joked weakly. A soft knock drew their attention to the doorway. Selena stood there holding a small bundle Caleb perched on her hip, bright-eyed and curious in the unfamiliar setting. Tentative, she stepped in. "I heard you were here. Thought maybe—" She trailed off, guilt flickering in her gaze. Adrian breathed in, heart tugged at the sight of his son. "It's okay," he said, voice husky. "Come in." Selena approached, tears brimming. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything, and I'm proud of you. You always wanted to prove yourself, but I never believed you'd go this far." He studied her face, sensing the remorse. "I'm not out to blame you," he said finally. "What's done is done. Let's just do right by Caleb." A small smile tugged at Selena's lips. She lifted Caleb closer so Adrian could see him. "Exactly." Meanwhile, Serena watched quietly, relief shining through her own raw emotions. The tension that once defined Adrian and Selena's interactions felt softer now, like the final notes of a long, dissonant song fading into acceptance. Later, a press release went out from Adrian's team, announcing his immediate retirement. Adrian Hale steps down as light heavyweight champion, citing the need to focus on family and future projects. Though fans expressed shock, many applauded his choice. The belt that symbolized so much was now a testament to the end of a journey, not the beginning of another. Adrian, propped up in bed with Serena's hand in his, felt an unexpected calm. He'd climbed the mountain he'd once thought impossible, and found that the real meaning lay not in the trophy, but in the people awaiting his return. "I'm done chasing ghosts," he told Serena softly. She kissed his temple, eyes shining. Time to build something real. Sunbeams filtered through tall evergreens, the crisp mountain breeze carrying distant bird calls. Mountain Adventure, once a decaying ski resort, now buzzed with fresh energy. Renovated cabins, cleared trails, and a refurbished main lodge signaled the birth of a new chapter. Families strolled along paths, exclaiming over the view, while staff in matching shirts guided visitors to hiking spots. On a grassy slope overlooking the lodge, a small crowd gathered for a modest celebration. Adrian, dressed in casual slacks and a collared shirt, stood beside Serena, who looked radiant in a simple summer dress. Together, they exchanged vows witnessed by close friends and family. Duncan beaming in fatherly pride, Jim Coulter grinning from ear to ear, Terry Malone snapping pictures on his phone, and Selena holding Caleb off to the side. Yes, Selena was there, smiling faintly, her arm looped in that of Marcus Roy, the project's construction manager. Rumor had it their friendship had turned into something deeper, but Adrian found he no longer harbored jealousy or resentment. He'd let go of the past, forging a sense of peace he once thought impossible. After the short, heartfelt ceremony, guests drifted to the lodge for drinks and laughter. Caleb toddled around, exploring everything that caught his eye. Sometimes he ran to Selena, sometimes to Adrian, excitement plastered on his cherubic face. It was an arrangement that felt oddly right. No tug-of-war, no animosity, just a shared commitment to the boy's future. Later, as twilight descended and the last well-wishers headed home, Adrian found himself standing outside a small wooden shed that housed the firewood. The hush of the mountain enveloped him. He picked up an axe and felt its weight, remembering how splitting logs had once been a simple solace after intense training. He raised the axe, letting it fall with practiced precision. The log cracked, splitting cleanly. Setting aside the pieces, he leaned on the handle, gazing out at the lodge lights and the silhouettes of cabins beyond. A soft footstep behind him signaled Serena's arrival. She slid her arms around his waist, resting her head on his shoulder. "Feeling nostalgic?" she teased gently. Adrian smiled into the dimming light. "A bit, thinking about how all this started with a single punch and ended with me swinging an axe on my own property." He paused, voice thick with emotion. "I guess life really can turn around if you let it." She pressed a kiss to his cheek, comfort radiating from her presence. They stood there a moment, letting the evening stillness wash over them. In the distance, they heard Caleb's happy squeal and Selena's answering laugh, followed by Marcus's warm rumble of conversation. The air smelled of pine and fresh earth, the fragrance of a new beginning. "Ready to head back?" Serena asked softly, lips curving into a contented smile. Adrian nodded, leaving the axe propped against a stump. Hand in hand, they walked toward the lodge, where light and laughter spilled out onto the porch. In that simple, radiant moment, Adrian was certain. Every fight, every heartbreak, every bruise had led him here, to a future shaped by hope rather than fear. And that was all he'd ever wanted.